AITA for putting hot sauce in my lunch to stop my coworker from stealing it? You really thought no one would notice, Ethan? I said, my voice cutting through the awkward silence of the break room. All eyes turned to him as he froze mid-bite, a forkful of my homemade chicken Alfredo dangling in the air. His expression shifted from surprise to his usual smug grin. Relax, man, he said, chewing slowly, like he had all the time in the world. It's just food. Just food? My chest tightened with frustration. It wasn't just food to me. That chicken Alfredo wasn't some cheap store-bought meal. It was homemade, a recipe passed down from my grandmother. I had spent the night before carefully preparing it, knowing it would be the highlight of my stressful day. And yet, here he was, eating it like he owned it. The break room was silent, but the tension was thick. People pretended to be absorbed in their phones or coffee cups, but I could feel their curiosity. This wasn't the first time food had gone missing in the office. Snacks, drinks, full meals, all vanished from the fridge without explanation. But Ethan? He was brazen about it. It had started small. A missing soda here, an open yogurt there. At first, people chalked it up to mistakes. Maybe someone grabbed the wrong thing by accident. But then the incidents became more frequent and specific. My carefully packed leftover chili was gone one day, replaced by an empty space in the fridge. The next week, it was my pad thai. I thought I was going crazy until Jenny, a coworker known for being polite to a fault, admitted her food had also been taken. She even stopped bringing in anything special because she couldn't bear to confront anyone about it. That's when she told me, it's probably Ethan. He doesn't even try to hide it. Ethan was new to the company, just 6 months in, but he had already earned a reputation. While most people would take time to learn the office culture, Ethan bulldozed through it. He treated the shared fridge like his personal buffet. He didn't even bother with subtlety. If something caught his eye, he'd take it. No questions asked, no guilt given. The final straw came last week. Jenny's fiancé had packed her a special lunch for their anniversary. It was something sentimental, a dish they had made on their first date. Jenny was glowing when she put it in the fridge that morning. By lunchtime, it was gone. Later that day, Ethan was spotted eating it at his desk. When Jenny timidly confronted him, he had the audacity to laugh. It looked good. You should be flattered I wanted to try it, he said, as if stealing someone's lunch was a compliment. That's when I decided enough was enough. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I went online and bought a discreet camera. Nothing too flashy, just something small enough to blend in with the clutter of the break room. For 2 days, I brought in decoy lunches, simple sandwiches and snacks I didn't mind losing. Sure enough, the camera caught Ethan in the act. He wasn't even sneaky about it. He'd stroll into the break room, open the fridge, and grab whatever looked appealing. Sometimes he'd eat it right there. Other times, he'd take it back to his desk like it was his right. I needed to do more than catch him. I needed to make sure he stopped for good. That's when the idea hit me. A little spice might teach him a lesson. The plan was simple. Make a lunch so tempting that Ethan wouldn't be able to resist. But with a twist. I decided to bring in another batch of my chicken Alfredo, but this time, I added a secret ingredient, ghost pepper sauce. Now, before anyone jumps on me, I didn't make it dangerous. I just made it memorable. Enough heat to leave an impression, but nothing harmful. I carefully packed the dish into a container with my name written in bold black letters. To make it even more obvious, I added a bright red label that read, "Do not touch." It was foolproof, or so I thought. The next morning, I set the trap. I placed the container right in the middle of the fridge, where it would be impossible to miss. Then I went about my day, trying to act normal while secretly counting down to lunchtime. By noon, I couldn't take the suspense anymore. I made my way to the break room, pretending to refill my coffee when I saw him. Ethan was sitting at one of the tables, fork in hand, casually digging into my lunch. I couldn't help myself. "Ethan," I said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Is that my lunch you're eating?" He looked up, mid-bite, with that same smug grin he always wore. "What if it is?" he said. "You can just make another one." The room went silent. A few coworkers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable but unwilling to intervene. Ethan must have thought he'd won, because he popped another forkful into his mouth. And that's when it hit him. His face turned bright red almost instantly. His cocky grin disappeared as he started coughing uncontrollably. He grabbed for his water bottle, chugging it like his life depended on it. But it didn't help. The heat was relentless. "What the hell is in this?" he managed to choke out between coughs. "Oh, just a little spice," I said, barely hiding my smirk. "Maybe next time, you'll think twice before stealing someone else's lunch." The break room erupted in laughter. Even Jenny, who usually stayed out of office drama, couldn't contain herself. Ethan, meanwhile, was desperately searching for relief. Someone handed him a carton of milk, which he downed in record time, but the damage was done. "You think this is funny?" he spat, his voice hoarse from the heat. "You poisoned me! Poisoned? I said, raising an eyebrow. It's ghost pepper sauce. Completely harmless, unless you count your ego. The room chuckled again, and for a moment, I thought that was the end of it. But of course, Ethan wasn't going to let it go. He stood up, still red-faced and sweaty, and pointed a finger at me. "This isn't over," he said, before storming out of the room. I thought that would be the end of it. Ethan would sulk for the rest of the day, and maybe, just maybe, he'd finally stop raiding the office fridge. But Ethan being Ethan, he decided to escalate things. About an hour later, I got an email from HR asking me to come in for a meeting. My stomach sank. Was he seriously trying to make this an official complaint? When I walked into the HR office, Ethan was already there, sitting across from the HR manager with a dramatic scowl on his face. His eyes were still watery, and his nose was red from the ghost pepper sauce. The manager gestured for me to sit, and I braced myself for whatever nonsense Ethan was about to spout. "He poisoned me," Ethan blurted out as soon as I sat down. "I could have ended up in the hospital." The HR manager raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Poisoned? Can you clarify what you mean by that?" Ethan launched into a theatrical rant about how I'd sabotaged the food in the fridge, making it unsafe for anyone to eat. He conveniently left out the part where he'd stolen it. When the manager turned to me for my side of the story, I kept it simple. I packed my lunch, labeled it with my name, and even added a note that said, "Do not touch," I explained. Ethan took it without my permission, and the ghost pepper sauce was just part of my recipe, Ethan interrupted. "Nobody uses ghost pepper sauce in chicken Alfredo. You did it on purpose." I shrugged. "Maybe I like my food spicy. Why were you eating it if it wasn't yours?" The HR manager leaned back in her chair, clearly trying to suppress a smirk. "Ethan," she said calmly, "did you take food from the fridge that wasn't yours?" Ethan hesitated, realizing he'd cornered himself. "Well, yeah, but everyone does it. It's a shared fridge." The manager's expression didn't change. "Actually, no, not everyone does it. We've received multiple complaints about food going missing, and your name has come up more than once." Ethan's face turned red again, though this time it wasn't from the ghost pepper. "Look," I said, trying to stay polite. "I didn't poison anything. I just spiced up my lunch the way I like it. If Ethan hadn't taken it, there wouldn't have been an issue." The HR manager nodded. "That's a fair point. Ethan, we're going to have to address this behavior. Taking other people's food is against company policy." Ethan muttered something under his breath, but it was clear he'd lost this battle. By the end of the meeting, HR assured me that I wasn't in trouble. They said they'd handle Ethan, and I left feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. The next day, Ethan's desk was empty. Word spread quickly that he'd been let go, and while no one openly celebrated, there was definitely a sense of quiet relief in the office. Jenny even joked, "Guess I can finally bring in leftovers again without worrying they'll disappear." A few days later, I found an envelope on my desk. Inside was a $20 bill and a note in Ethan's handwriting that simply said, "For the lunch. Sorry." I couldn't tell if it was an actual apology or just his way of saving face, but honestly, it didn't matter. The fridge has been drama-free ever since, and I've become somewhat of a legend in the office. People still joke about the ghost pepper incident, and someone even suggested we install a plaque above the fridge that says, "Don't mess with the lunches." So Reddit AITA for adding a little spice to my lunch to stop a food thief? Or did Ethan finally get what he deserved?